In today's video, I want to dive in and tackle a subject which has been plaguing new investors and even intermediate investors for quite some time, and that is NVIDIA versus AMD. What are the caveats? What are the different directions of each company? And what is the better stock to invest into? Whether you're a trader, swing trader, or a long-term holder and investor, which is the better choice? What is going on between these two companies? Which one's going to grow faster? All of these questions can be answered. Stick around. We're going to dive into all of these topics. Strap in, get ready. Do not skip any part of this video because we're going to talk about all of these things. Let's get right into it. So first, we have to look at the hyperscalers, which are the Mag 7. So we're going to talk about Meta, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Amazon. These are the hyperscaler companies, and they are buying up AI chips as fast as they possibly can. Hand over fist, they're just drowning in buy orders. And that's because the world is moving towards AI. Everybody's implementing AI. Palantir, SoFi, HIMS, Tesla, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon, Apple, AVGo, which is Broadcom, and the list goes on and on and on and on with companies that are just trying to soak up as much AI as possible in order to relieve stress and tensions and achieve higher goals and margins and percentages more accurately for analytics and data-driven decisions in their companies. So the question is, between NVIDIA and AMD, which is the company for you, or which is the better company to invest into? Well, recently an analyst upgraded AMD stock from $125 to over $200. And there are other analysts that are bullish upgrading the stock as well. So you have to look at the market cap of AMD, which we're going to dive into. When you look at massive market share like NVIDIA has, it's not going to go up. This is a monopoly. They've monopolized their products, which is why it's so expensive to get an NVIDIA graphics card and hard to acquire it. Believe me, I know I have a couple of 5090s here at the house and they are great. I'm using it on this computer. However, AMD does have an advantage, a big advantage, and a lot of it is going to account for their growth in the CPU processing. They compete with Intel. NVIDIA doesn't really compete in that space, and there's a lot of other spaces where AMD is looking to grow and capitalize. When we look at the market cap of 260 or 270 billion versus 4.2 trillion, we can see which company is more likely to 2 or 3x. Now, I'm not saying that AMD is going to go to $1,000, but I did tell my students in Discord and on YouTube at times to buy AMD when it was $110 and $112, and it ran to $160. You can see the trade right there on the screen. I have students that bought call options on AMD for $125 with an expiration of July 18th. And by July 18th, a few weeks earlier, the run started, but by July 18th, AMD was pushing $160, and it produced results of 12,000%, turning $300 into almost $4,000 per option. This is insane growth. You would never have made that kind of growth on NVIDIA. NVIDIA was 145 last year and it ran to 170. There is growth potential on the table for NVIDIA. They're both great stocks in their own right. If you want more reward but more risk, AMD. If you want less risk, less reward, more consistent, more long-term consistency, it's NVIDIA. However, AMD has a big part of the gaming share because of not only desktop CPUs, but also because they are pretty much the sole company behind PlayStation and Xbox. In fact, Foxconn makes all of the chips for AMD, and AMD's technology goes into those chips, and they are sold to PlayStation. Sony has specifically used AMD for their previous consoles, and they're going to continue to use AMD for the PlayStation 6. This is exclusive. If Xbox continues this trend, that means consoles are exclusively AMD. And not only that, AMD doesn't really have much competition in the processing space for CPUs. It's pretty much unequivocal fact that AMD's 3D processors are significantly better than Intel's for gaming, especially their Threadrippers and their 9950X3D, their 7950X3D, even their old 5950X, which I have two computers with those CPUs in it. They outperform Intel when it comes to multi-core performance. I had an Intel 13900KS and a 14900KS in two computers here and switched them both to the Ryzen 9950X3D, and these processors perform better in games and they perform way better in 3D applications, rendering video, everything. So AMD for the most part is controlling the central processing or CPU, desktop CPU. They're controlling that market right now because Intel is struggling. Now, that's for another video. Intel has a lot of potential growth of the price to sales of 1. They could 10 to 15x in the next 10 years or sooner. But AMD does own a lot of the CPU market share, and if Intel was to go go under, AMD would be the NVIDIA of desktop processing. And not only that, they're also the NVIDIA of console gaming. And they make great video cards as well. And they're easier to acquire. They're not as powerful as NVIDIA, but they are also very strong. They're growing their revenue year over year, quarter over quarter, and they have great growth in the servers. And as far as servers and server AI, they are growing their processing power and their sales and growth in servers as well. So we have to look at AMD as a whole. They both have different aspects of growth based on all the technical analysis, research, analyst ratings, and growth that they continue to give over at AMD. It's a very real world possibility that AMD could achieve 200 by the end of the year, and by the end of 2026 be pushing in the mid 200s, pretty much trying to achieve 2x in the next year or two. Do we see NVIDIA doing that? And if so, how many times can they do that? When you look at the market cap, there's so much more room for growth than AMD. One of the things to think about is when I called AMD back here, we gotta forget all of the market crash, because that was not AMD's fault or any one company's fault. It was just tariffs and a lot of fear. However, before that, AMD was down around 105 to 110 in this range. I said it was a buy. No one could have ever forecasted the tariff issues that came up. But immediately after tariffs, AMD was right back to 108 or 112. So when you connect the dots between before and after tariffs, AMD was between 105 and 115, right in the range where I said to buy, and also dollar cost average. And the stock has now achieved 166. So essentially, I want to show you a metric to gauge the actual growth of the stock. You have to understand every company out there, including HIMS, SoFi, Bank of America, Palantir, Tesla, NVIDIA, AMD, they're all using AI, but AMD and NVIDIA are creating it. Meta, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Apple, they're also using it. Although Microsoft, Google, and Apple have their own AI and they're generating their own AI, as well as Amazon, but they're using NVIDIA and AMD hardware and server hardware in order to process this AI data. So essentially, AMD and NVIDIA are the two big kahunas producing all of this hardware. So the market share is going to have to be divvied up. Obviously, there's more market share in NVIDIA, but that means more growth for AMD. What we're going to do is look at 270 billion divided by the trailing 12 month, 270 divided by 27 billion. So here's what we're going to do. 270 divided by 28 essentially gives a price to sales of 9.6 on AMD. On NVIDIA, we have 4.2 trillion, and we're going to divide that by 148 billion. So remember that number, 9.6, lower is better, 9.6. And on NVIDIA, we have 4.2 divided by 0.148, giving us a 28.3. You divide that by 9.6. There's essentially a 3x potential for AMD. I say more or less a 2x return, 50% to 100% in the next couple of years, which is a lot of growth. Do we think NVIDIA is going to push $400 in the next year or two? Hard to say. There's likely a lot more growth on the table for AMD. Very, very probable that AMD will have more scalability as long as they continue to do what they're doing. Now, another thing we can do is a per capita comparison between the two companies. So we already know that if we divide 4.2 trillion divided by the market cap of AMD, which is 270 billion, we're going to divide by 0.270, then we have a per capita measurement of 15.5. So we take 148 billion on NVIDIA's revenue, and we're going to divide this by 15.5, which is the per capita measurement, giving us a number that's comparable between the two companies based on their size. When we do that, the trailing 12 month on AMD should be 9.5 billion. If it's 9.5 billion per capita, it's identical to NVIDIA. Anything below is worse and anything higher is better. So when we look at AMD, we're looking for 9.5 and AMD has 27, and therefore 27 is 3x, which coincides with price to sales. These numbers work together, essentially showing us that AMD is currently per capita generating 3 times the amount of revenue that NVIDIA is. This has to do with market share and monopolization, which NVIDIA already has a majority of market share. When you have 95% of the market, you're not getting any more as technological advances take place. So when we look at AMD and NVIDIA, we also want to look at EBITDA, which is a very important number. So we have a trailing 12-month EBITDA on NVIDIA of 88.25 billion. Very strong number, 88.25 divided by 15.5 means AMD needs 5.69 or better. Otherwise, they're losing. As a per capita measurement, they're looking for 5.69, and they have 5.98. So their EBITDA is equal to or better. It's actually better, slightly better. So 3 times the revenue and slightly better better EBITDA per capita. So AMD, very strong there. When we look at the balance sheets between both companies, both balance sheets are good. NVIDIA has $40 billion in cash, and they have more assets to cover liabilities they can completely cover. We look at AMD, they can completely cover as well, and they have $3 billion in cash. What we look at is their total equity number of $57.8 billion because they have very, very low liabilities. And we look at NVIDIA, their liabilities are nowhere near as low, and their equity is $83 billion. So if we look at $83 billion and we divide that by 15.5, AMD's equity should be $5.3 billion, and their equity is $57 billion. Essentially, if we divide 57 by 5.3, then we essentially have 10.7. So again, AMD has 1,000% per capita advantage in total equity. You have to look at numbers per capita because market cap signifies current, price to sales, and per capita measurements gauge current to future. So essentially, every number indicates that AMD is outpacing NVIDIA at this point, which is not a surprise because when you have 90% market cap and market share, you're not going to advance. You're not going to take up anymore. It's just not happening. It's not how this works. So now use the Walmart and Amazon as the example. Walmart is outpacing Amazon now, and they're implementing AI, and they're doing a lot of things better, and they're growing more in per capita, beating the ever-loving dust out of Amazon. So when you look at AMD, it's more of a growth potential, and you're seeing it on paper. They have better equity. So you might argue, as one might do, saying, well, NVIDIA has $41 billion in liabilities, but they have $125 billion in assets. Well, if you divide $125 billion in assets by 15.5, AMD would need $8 billion in assets, and they have 71. So again, they have almost 10, like 9.5x the amount of assets based on per capita. AMD's significantly outpacing NVIDIA as far as the potential growth and the numbers they're doing per capita, which is very important to understand. When we go to free cash flow on both companies and look at this, we look at NVIDIA's free cash flow. It's $72 billion. 72 divided by 15.5 means AMD needs 4.6 or better, and they have 2.75. So the free cash flow is the pivotal moment between the two companies. Not by much, but there is a pivotal negative here. So let's go back to the previous quarters, and that's where we're going to find the difference. It's actually the most recent quarter because if we look at quarter 4 2024 and we look at previous quarter 3 24, we see that's where the discrepancies slow down because AMD has started outpacing almost $1 billion. 2 quarters in a row, almost $1 billion. It's an improvement. So if we look back at these quarters, this is what's hurting AMD. If we had 4 quarters at $1 billion, they'd have $4 billion and they need 4.6. So essentially at the rate they've been going over the past 2 quarters, they've almost broken even. But what's really hurting them is the previous quarters, which also gauges potential in future growth. They went from 300 million to 700 million, 300 million or 200 million to $1 billion. So the cash flow is showing correction and everything else is showing much quicker expansion than NVIDIA. And right now is the divergence. Over the last year, you can see the growth AMD has jumped into, the most recent deals in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. And as far as their server data, that's also growing. And their CPU desktop processors are also the monopoly in this market because Intel is struggling. And on top of all of that, they're exclusive to PlayStation 6 and Sony and all of their updated hardware and their new consoles coming out. As far as Microsoft and Xbox, they're likely to be the exclusive hardware for those consoles as well. So AMD is positioning themselves very strong, and considering their price to sales is much better, there's a lot more potential on the table. So essentially, if you're looking to grow your portfolio consistently, safely, more smoothly, long-term investing, NVIDIA is slightly better. But if you're looking for faster growth, slightly more risk, AMD is better. But in the long term, bar none on volatility, if you're just going to hold for 10 years and want maximum return, it's going to be hard to beat AMD. If AMD delivers like they should and like they most likely will, the gains will be significantly more than NVIDIA because of market share. If you're playing it safe, NVIDIA. If you want consistency, NVIDIA. If you don't mind deviating from some safety and consistency and having a lot of drawdown, because AMD has more drawdown than NVIDIA, although NVIDIA did have some serious drawdown from 145 all the way to 105. They basically had the same or more drawdown than AMD, but on the average, there's slightly more drawdown in AMD. If you're willing to withstand that, which is volatility, then AMD is the better choice overall. 4 trillion in market cap versus 270 billion. One of them is going to go up more than the other, and always the smaller company, the one with less market share, always has more room to grow. It's just the way it works, and everything looks good, and AMD is not in debt. They have cash. They have enough cash to sit on to protect themselves in the event of problems, and they can use that cash and these assets to grow even further, which is exactly what they're doing. If everything I'm saying to you right now is confusing you, maybe you have no idea of what per capita and market cap, market share, and all these fundamentals and quant analysts and all the things that I've talked about in this video, and you're just spinning, your head is spinning. You want to learn how to grow your portfolio? I would love to help you. Don't hesitate. Take action right now. The link to join the Discord and get started is below. Remember, what you put off today for tomorrow, someone else put off yesterday or today. Time is of the essence. If you want to make the profits that you're seeing on the screen right now, I would love to help you grow your portfolio. It's what drives me every single day. I was raised Catholic. I'm not perfect, but my parents were very hard on me to do the right thing. And when I hit rock bottom and went through divorce and had a life disaster for several years, I told myself that if I could make some achievements in the stock market, that I would help others. I did that. Now I'm helping others grow their portfolio, and I want to help you do the same thing. Don't take my word for it. Let's take a listen to what my student Mike had to say. Here with Mike, and Mike has actually been in my Discord since virtually day one. So I'd like to introduce Mike. Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Corey. My name is Mike. I'm 73 years old, and I joined the Discord to learn strategies to earn passive income. I started out with 25,000 and it's now 84,000. Can't believe it.
That is awesome. That's like a 3x return in 1 year. That's a lot.
I love it. I can't wait to get up in the morning.
Awesome. That is the goal. I'm very, very happy to hear it.
The biggest benefit for me was when we had the 2 coaching calls a week. You can interact with yourself in the coaching calls, and you tell us what's going on with the current events. I just eat that stuff up because I do a lot of reading. Coaching calls bring you up to date and put you in the moment, so you don't feel like you're missing everything. I would tell them that once they go into the training modules and learn all the strategies, and we post trades in the Discord, and if you take the trades and you're hitting it over 80% success rate, how can you go wrong? It's a fun ride, and boot camp's a blast. They'll have fun with the boot camp. You really learn a lot. You're able to really interact one-on-one with you, and well, who says you can't teach an old dog new tricks? The community in the Discord pulls up other members in the community, and you can interact in general chat, and then when you have specific questions, you can go to the Ask Corey section. It's all there for you. You just have to do it. You're happy. Get a bunch of small wins, you get happier and happier.
You heard what my student Mike had to say. He's over 70 years old, and he is so excited, so happy that he has been able to over 3.5x his portfolio. And I'm happy to bring to you guys now that over the last month since we recorded that, he is now just about teetering the 100,000, 4x in his portfolio in 1 year. I would love to help you do the exact same thing. The link to get started is below. I look forward to seeing you in the Discord very soon, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Take care of yourselves, fam, and enjoy your weekend.